UFC returns to Paramount Plus this weekend for another numbered event. The main card for UFC 325 features a rematch for the UFC featherweight title when two-time champs Alexander Volkanovski and Diego Lopes go head-to-head. The great is 7-1 in UFC featherweight title fights. Lopes, meanwhile, tied for third most wins in the division since 2023. That's the tail of the tape for our main card fight. We're going to go through each one of these fights, though, because we got less than 24 hours, or I say just over 24 hours, before that main event in Australia, home of Alexander the Great Volkanovski. So let's welcome in our UFC duo of Brian Campbell and Shaq Mahjouri to set the stage for us. And we're going to start with that featherweight bout featuring the champ, Alexander Volkanovski, taking on number 2, Diego Lopes. We've seen this pretty recently, a year ago, when Volkanovski won the title by unanimous decision. BC, I'll start with you here. Which fighter, in your opinion, has the edge in this rematch?
Well, look, I'll say it up front that certainly Volkanovski's edge in experience and technique both won him that first fight and has him as a slight betting favorite. But I think in this rematch, 9 months removed from UFC 314, the edge in my mind goes to Diego Lopes, and it's really for power and durability. Look, at 31 years old, he has grown so much in the past year, admitting that the loss to Volkanovski probably had a lot to do with maybe the moment being too big for him. Maybe him eschewing his game plan as soon as the fight started and following Volk around rather than cutting off the cage, never utilizing his ground game. Even with those mistakes, he dropped Volkanovski in round 2 with an overhand right, hurt him with an uppercut, and damaged his eye in round 4. I think this fight has all the makings to be a lot closer in the rematch, and it's that power, that fighting spirit, and maybe the durability of Lopes that I think is the greatest advantage coming in, because Volkanovski, let's not forget, was knocked out in 2 of his last 3 fights.
Diego Lopes has all the physical edges here and maybe some of the more offensive technique ones as well. But the thing is, I don't know that 10 months is enough time for Diego to bridge enough of the technique and experience gap between him and Volkanovski. Alexander Volkanovski beat Diego by outthinking him. He always had that outside lead foot positioning that allowed him to circle away from the fence. It allowed him to move away from Diego's power hands. And one of the things that really stood out to me is in all of those rounds, Alexander Volkanovski outstruck Diego by margins of 2x or 3x. That shouldn't be happening when Volkanovski is the shorter guy. Diego's the one who's supposed to be jabbing him up at range, not Volkanovski, but it's his mind, it's his technique. It's the fact that he was able to get Diego biting on all the feints. It's the fact that he was able to stay away and limit a lot of what makes Diego a potent offensive source. And while I'm confident that especially in the wrestling department, Diego has managed to make some grounds, and while I think he's going to know to try and win that outside lead foot positioning, what's going to happen when Volk switches stance and starts moving the other way? I think this will be a closer fight than the first one, but I just don't think less than a year is enough time for Diego to outthink Volkanovski.
Let's move on to the co-main event, a matchup of top 10 ranked UFC lightweights. The fan favorite, Dan the Hangman Hooker, taking on Benoit Saint-Denis. So, Shaq, who do you like in this one? Who has the edge?
I like BSD, and part of that has to do with Hooker's maybe inadvisable but commendable fighting spirit. He's only 2 months removed from fighting Arman Tsarukyan, where Hooker had his orbital bone broken, and he is right back in the mix against a guy who's offensively potent on the feet. Benoit Saint-Denis throws haymakers. He's a berserker, he's a marauder, and he's got a really great offensive wrestling game. We saw Hooker struggle against Tsarukyan in that department. I think he'll have more success against Benoit Saint-Denis, who's, a little bit less refined than Arman, but I just think that Benoit Saint-Denis is going to overwhelm him. I don't know where Hooker's chin is at 2026. I don't know how much of his wrestling defense will hold up. I just think Benoit Saint-Denis, if he's careful, if he doesn't get too reckless like we've seen him get in the past, can overwhelm Dan within 10 minutes.
Yeah, Shaq, I'm right with you on the advantage going to BSD. Let's remember, Dan Hooker will be 36 in just 2 weeks. He's made a heck of an 11-year run in the UFC, doing what he's known for, making ill-advised action fights that we love, that we remember. And to his credit, he's been able to stay relevant inside the top 10 for most of that run. But this new refined BSD, who changed trainers to start last year, ripped off 3 consecutive wins by stoppage, he's a lot less likely to have his hands hands down, have his chin out, and just go to caveman-style brawling. BSD has too many offensive weapons, including his submission game. 2 of his last 3 fights ended via submission win. This could be a fight of the year, fight of the night contender. It also has all the makings to potentially be a demolition, as BSD just has too many ways to hurt and maybe even potentially finish Hooker.
Okay, so some excitement on the horizon for that one. Let's stay in the lightweight division for a fight between Rafael Fiziev and Mauricio-Ruffy. Rafael boasts the 4th best takedown defense in lightweight history. Mauricio brings a 92% knockout rate to the fight. BC, who has the edge?
It's a slight edge, but I'm going to go with Mauricio-Ruffy here. And the edge really is that dynamic striking ability. Obviously, that's what we know about Fiziev, too. Has an absolutely explosive style in there, the Muay Thai kickboxing. But Ruffy is known for the spinning varieties, giving you knockout of the year potential. And also, it's a bit of a referendum fight for him. Look, Ruffy faced off against Benoit Saint-Denis last September. Got taken down, got dominated on the ground, was eventually submitted in a very disappointing loss that halted his momentum. To make changes, Ruffy not only left Brazil for Australia, he joined the camp of Alexander Volkanovski over there with Joe Lopez's freestyle MMA gym outside of Sydney. So I'm looking for a lot of improvements for Ruffy. And while Fiziev is coming off a victory, there was a 3-fight losing skid right before that. I think the onus with the higher bright side here is Ruffy, and he's got plenty of motivation to go out there and do what he does best.
I agree with BC that Ruffy has more upside, but I don't think that we should give Fiziev too much criticism for the 3-fight losing streak, because I think in part he was sort of a victim of bad luck, right? As a majority decision loss against a Justin Gaethje, who was far better equipped for that fight than he would be right now. Then you had that TKO knee injury that he suffered against Gamrot, sort of a freak accident. Yes, he loses the 2nd fight to Gaethje, but he took it on 2 weeks' notice after a 1.5 years off. What we saw in his most recent fight, a win over Ignacio Bahamendez, is where Fiziev is at when he's healthy and has proper time to train and prepare for a fight. His wrestling game improved dramatically. He's still perhaps the best straight-up Muay Thai striker in the lightweight division. And the thing that worries me about Ruffy is I don't think this is much of a de-escalation from his loss to Benoit Saint-Denis, right? Fiziev is very seasoned, he's very clever, and he's very experienced. Discipline is what cost Ruffy against Benoit Saint-Denis. He was constantly looking for that highlight reel finish, and ultimately he was the one who was stopped. I think that's something that Volkanovski's camp is going to hammer out of him quickly. I just don't think this is enough of a step back in competition for a guy who's still finding his feet at the elite level. Give me Fiziev by the slightest of margins.
All right, let's move on to the big boys in that heavyweight bout between Tuivasa and Salkilld-Teixeira. The big story in this one is Tuivasa fighting for the first time in nearly 18 months. He took a break to reset after that 5-fight losing streak. His opponent, meanwhile, guys, has never been out in the first round in his career. Shaq, who has the edge?
Well, I thought it was Tai Tuivasa, and then he tipped the scales at 265.5 pounds, which is half a pound before the heavyweight cutoff limit, and that concerns me because I thought after so much time off, Ty was going to put the shoeies and the beers down and really get himself prepared for this. However, I'm going to vote with my heart here, and I'm going to stick with Bam Bam. At 32 years old, yes, he has some mileage on him, a lot with the last with 4 KO losses in his last 5 losses. However, at 32 years old, especially in a division that skews old, Bam Bam still has time to turn the corner. He has experience preparing for longer guys like Alexander Volkov. He's going to know how to work his way inside where he can hit Teixeira with those haymakers. And unlike Volkov, Teixeira likes to fight in close. He's not afraid to welcome Tai into that danger zone. At 26 years old, I just think that we don't know enough about Thaleson Teixeira. It's really young to be fighting elite heavyweight contenders. I'm going to go with, I guess, the guy that I'm more familiar with, and I know what Tai can do on a good day, and I'm going to edge with him over the guy who's kind of a mystery still in the division. All
right, so some synergy there between you and BC. BC, you also like that fighter too. Let's go on to the first fight, actually, that's on this main card. It's a matchup of Australian lightweights between Quillen Salkilld and Mullarkey. Salkilld a perfect 3-0 in UFC with 2 first-round KOs. Mullarkey is 3-1 in his home country, BC. What gives here? Who do you like?
Look, Salkilld is rising right now. This is, in essence, an opportunity to showcase him on the main card in front of those Australian fans, and for all the attention that middleweight prospect Ateba Gauthier got last year for his breakout 3 victories in his debut year in the UFC. So did Quillen Salkilld, not only going 3-0, but delivering a brutal knockout of the year contender. The odds are heavy in Salkild's favor, so it's not me going out on a limb and saying this, but I will say this about the young kid. He's aggressive, he's sharp, and he is fighting an opponent who is there to be hurt. Mullarkey has been stopped 6 times in his UFC career, including 4 times in his last 6 fights. It would be an upset here to see the young prospect go down. I really think the rise of Quillen Salkilld will continue.
One day, these pronunciations, you guys, are going to be second nature for us here. But until then, we are glad that we have the experts here to break it down for us. UFC 325 headed to Paramount Plus this weekend. We appreciate the fellas telling us to tail the tape, giving us who they think has the edge in this one. Head on over to the Paramount Plus app. Plenty of things to get you ready for this fight in the UFC tab. It all gets started at 9 o'clock Eastern on that main card.